Next up, we have Niels. Niels has a rich experience in asset management across all industries, but also across various geographies, from what I hear. Ivory Coast, Philippines as well, and also he will be talking more about that experience he's had with Maximo in the Philippines. So, welcome, Niels.
Thank you very much. All right. Warm welcome once again. Thank you very much for listening. I've got two conversations, or two parts of the conversation. The first part will be on a 3-year journey on how we had a struggling CMMS and how we tried to fix it up to a system that actually worked for us. And the second part of the conversation is about how we then brought that into MAS 9. So both are about 20 minutes. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. So I'm presenting this on personal title, right? This was for one of my clients for the last 4 or 5 years, which is a Filipino power conglomerate. For those who are familiar with the Philippines, there's only 3 of those, so it's not that difficult to figure out which one it was. But yeah, so where are we at? So there's 2 parts. Part number 1 is how we found a system that effectively was printing work orders. And I remember asking a technician, well, why do you use Maximo? And he said, oh, if I don't have a work order number, I can't get a permit to work. Right? So literally the only thing they used was the work order number. And we brought that to enabling transformation with all sorts of digitization initiatives going on in this facility now. The second part is how we brought those 19 power plants, which adds up to about 3,000 megawatts or 2,500 users into MAS 9. And we did that in 18 weeks, which is a speedy timeline. So I think the most important thing is that so that makes sense. So we piloted this on 2 different power plants, and then we copied a lot of the best practices to the rest of the fleet. And that project ran from 2021 to 2023, and that gives us a lot of results. And but that governance structure that we set up and those improvements that we set up were really what drove us to enable a speedy MAS 9 upgrade in the end. If I had tried to upgrade to MAS 9 in 2021, it would have been an utter failure. And now that we did that in 2025, right, we could achieve it. So the company realized that the CMMS was underutilized, and we took action. We really wanted to drive business adoption. So the first one of that was hiring an external consultant, and they were doing a gap assessment on how can it be that we buy a state-of-the-art system like Maximo, and after many years we are still struggling to achieve the benefits. So that was John Reeve. So John Reeve is a famous IBM consultant. I should say the late John Reeve, he passed away not long ago. He identified 126 gaps across 45 domains. And that was really the starting point of our journey. He showed the company very clearly that foundations were not in place. And if we don't have data, if we don't have processes, if we don't have people who understand how to use the CMMS, as well as just processes not being documented, it's not going to work. So he proposed a 5-year roadmap. And that 5-year roadmap roughly was about establishing roles and responsibilities. It was about understanding the business rules in our data plans. It was then about activating the more fancy buttons of Maximo when we start talking about scheduling of work, reusing our data for chronic failure analysis, looking at asset costing, to then on in the 3rd year to look at RCAs and MOC and outage tracking as part of the Maximo roadmap. And then towards mobility, and lastly towards continuous improvement. So this was really the starting point of our conversation. And what we really mentioned to leadership was that only 5% of companies have that integrated asset management framework. And that's what we wanted to achieve. So the second step of that was to get started, we hired a CMMS expert. So that was a new position the company introduced, and that's where I come in. Right? I was hired to be the business owner of Maximo in helping the organization make the best out of it. Now, I remember talking to my board at the time, and they said, well, one of our ambitions is that in due time we can be at Maximo conferences to share a story of how this is a success. So I'm glad to announce today I'm here, right? So I can tick that one off the list as well. So this was a project under our head office, under the Chief Technology Officer, which later became the Chief Asset Management Office. So this was part of a larger initiative to be, yes, we are a technology company, but we need to manage our assets and not only the technology asset. So in charge of making Maximo a success. So the third element there was we started a 3-year project based on John Reeves' assessment, but with some flexibility. So if we look at an organization for 2 weeks and we interview people, we know a lot, but we don't know everything. So we said we cannot make a 3-year or 5-year roadmap and follow it to the letter. We need to be flexible enough to align on what we really need. And that was a good thing as well because the organization keeps on changing, keeps on maturing. Maximo is not the only system and maintenance is not the only department. So some of the examples right where we started was there's a lot of junk in the system. So we started focusing on visibility of the work, getting rid of some of the bad data. We looked at inventory, strategic replenishment to really write the guidelines on what is our min level, max level, and start talking to technicians about recording our failure history. And so that was really the starting point. And during our kickoff, we said, well, we have a Ferrari, but the check engine light is on because we're putting in the wrong fuel, where the driver is a guy with no driver's license, and so on. So we started with a top-down mandate, right? We said we're going to start a 3-year program. We need to do it with Maximo. We're going to make Maximo a success. Everybody needs to help, right? That's the top-down mandate. But actually, most of the work, of course, is bottom-up execution. So 3-year support from leadership, plus what we said is an annual realignment. So we did look at making a roadmap for year 1, 2, and 3. But at the end of year 1, we realigned it and said, actually, for next year, we want to do something different. Right? And year 3 is different again. So at the end, I didn't complete the entire roadmap of John, right? But we made it better. We made it more aligned with what the business needed. And then we execute that in a learning fashion. So it's not a waterfall, right? We said we're going to split it up in small improvements, and each individual improvement goes through some steps where we need to understand knowledge and competence. We need to grow the maturity of the team impacted by the change, define how they're going to work. Then, and that's the red dot here, we're going to talk to the department heads and get their buy-in on the 2B before we start fixing up data, process, people, training, everything. Yeah. After it's all fixed, we said we have another intervention point where we need to understand from the leadership if they're ready to start working the new way. Right? So 2 approvals. Do we agree with the department heads that this is how we should be doing it? Right? That's before we do the work. And after we do the work, is the team ready to go live with this particular improvement? And then we need to practice it. We need to track that it's being adopted. We need to probably improve it an extra round for some edge cases that we didn't think about. So we didn't do this one time. We did this loop 15 times per year, right, at the same time. So we would have one of these improvements on warehouse-related matters going through these steps. We would maybe have another one on planning and scheduling, another one on asset data, but all of them going through these steps and having small incremental improvements. So we said that is a learn-as-we-go approach. Important to know is that this is a Filipino conglomerate, right? So my bonus structure is annual. My targets are annual. My tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, annual. Performance incentive scheme, annual. right? Budget, annual. So we said but at the same time we need to be flexible because we don't know where the organization will be 4 years from now. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying we were agile, we were flexible, but within the year on a limited target. Yeah. So this annual reprioritization did help because we had several reorganizations in the end during the last 5 years. This project has always sustained because we could adopt with new prioritizations of the business. So to make it a little bit more practical, right? Obviously, this project was costly. We said we're going to focus on return on asset. So I'm not going to immediately calculate what is going to be the investment or the improvement of every individual change. Right? We're going to look at what is it doing long term for our asset. And that gives benefits because instead of only looking at manpower savings, we can also look at the secondary, like if I optimize my spare parts, right? That's something I can do inside Maximo or outside Maximo, but we can claim the maturity growth as part of this project and its benefits. So optimizing return on assets, right? We're doing the project either because we're going to reduce cost, or we're doing it because we're trying to reduce risks. So then for every improvement, we said we need to enable it. That's at the bottom. Right? That's coaching the team, sitting down with them on what is going to be the to-be process. There's always inhibitors on why we can't do it. Right? We're too busy, or our data is crap, or any other thing that you can think of. But we're doing it for a value-realizing process. On the next slide, I've got some examples. And after that, with continuous improvement, we should be getting that return on investment. So it was never about where is the button in the system, right? But it would be about, for example, right, we had one initiative on defect elimination and chronic failure analysis. So that is something that we would champion with the engineering team. We said, this is what we want to do. This is the process. How do we do this in Maximo? Right? Another one would be on the PM strategies. Another one would be on the sparing. Obviously, if we get this in place, our return on investment will thrive. To do that, we need to get rid of bad work, bad data, lack of processes, weak failure reporting, and so on. Right, so this is where the effort goes. And to facilitate all that, we would build competence in the team, have leadership. As we championed it in two sides, right, those sides could set the agenda, but the other side would have to apply the same or explain why they can't. Right? So yes, you have an opt-out, but we did try to standardize everybody to the same way of working. So even more practical, right? How do we do that then? Well, let's talk about backlog management. I remember 2022, I was talking to our maintenance manager at a call site, and I asked him, what is your backlog? Right? What is your maintenance backlog? And he said, my maintenance backlog is 50. Okay, why 50? He said, well, in my Excel spreadsheet, I have 50 urgent items deferred to the next outage. Okay, so it's 50 urgent jobs deferred to outage. So that's not the entire repair backlog. Right? So I said, how many repairs do you have? Right? He didn't know. So when we looked into Maximo, we found about 5,000 roughly. Yeah? What we then said is we're going to clean this up. Right? Backlog management is something Maximo should be doing. So that's our value-adding process. And we'll only make that happen if we understand why we need it, if we accept the tool, if management agrees with the KPIs, right? And in the end, we need to trust our data. So the value realizing process, backlog management, process owner is maintenance, right? So they own the change. They have to champion the change and implement. All I can do with my team is coach them on how it should be done, help them set up the data, clean up any mess that they have, make the KPI reports, etc. Right, so together we remove the inhibitors. Obviously, if I get backlog management under control, I should be reducing my unplanned outages because in this list of repairs, some would be important but forgotten. If I can get in control of that, I will fix it before there's major damage. I will work where it matters most, but also I can avoid secondary damages. So if I leave faulty equipment too long, it can break other equipment as well. So indirect and direct cost savings because of that. Inhibitors that we had to focus on, service requests, bad data, cleaning up that list of 5,000 backlog to the actual backlog, which was closer to 1,000. So those 4,000 had to be struck off the record after proper engineering review. So very important, we classified those value-adding processes as an epic for saying this is an overarching umbrella term for one improvement, but we'll have many user stories or improvements around that. The maintenance planning team took the lead in that epic, and we would do a number of activities. So we sat down with them, we said, well, for all backlog, if we want to manage it in Maximo, we should write down why is it in our backlog. Are we waiting for parts? Are we waiting for contractors? Is the scaffold not up? All of that. When we have that data, we need to visualize it in the monthly report. We need to visualize it in your start center so it becomes part of how we manage backlog. Of course, in the beginning, you won't like the chart because it has 5,000 work orders and 4,000 need to be closed, or canceled. So we did that bulk cancellation as well as enriching that data for the open records. And then lastly, that's where the leadership support comes in. We said, well, now that we've done all of that, we now also need commitment that when we talk about backlog, there's only one number, the number that comes out of Maximo, that's it. When we talk about the sizing, the trending, whatever, everything based on Maximo data only. So backlog management is really just one improvement, We did about 45 of them over 3 years. So we looked at work orders to defining when is it too early or too late to do this PM. We spoke about EAM competence development in terms of what kind of onboarding training, as well as boot camp, like 5-day in-depth training should we have. We spoke about chronic failure analysis with our engineering departments on how can we avoid reoccurrence of failures. And then the last one in green was KPI reporting. So our entire fleet is using all maintenance KPIs coming out of Maximo. And if we can't, then we need to first fix Maximo so we can. So I know it was very in-depth on backlog management, We really did that on all those other projects as well. And today I'm saying, well, all these small changes together do make a big impact. This agility of splitting it into those 45 smaller improvements do give you the option to survive organizational changes, The list is different today than it would have been 5 years ago. But it did help the company grow as a business. The obvious one is we put a lot of the change management and the ownership low in the organization with the planning team, with the storekeepers of the warehouse, with the asset management teams of the facilities. And in a relatively low market like the Philippines, that means a lot of coaching, a lot of training. What are the best practices? What are the options that we have? How do we feel that this will best benefit the business? And of course, we leave Maximo a better place than what it was. So looking at the time, so all those changes together, I can say it worked. And I'm happy that it worked. So we had, if we look 2021 to 2024, we see a 46 to 67% increase in repair time, or decrease, So improvement of the repair time. Meaning work orders and equipment gets fixed faster. Not only the important ones, all across the board. 62% faster for emergency works, Right? So obviously our list of emergency works is better, but also if we compare 2021 to now, 62% faster. On the right, asset information, right, we improved that by 68% of critical assets. Our out-of-stock backlog dropped by 53% by having proper list of production critical sparing. Our work order on-time completion rate went up to 95. Right, and then the less tangible ones in terms of defect elimination. So every quarter we review reoccurrence of defects to try and fix it forever, which I'm sure Eric will talk about a lot in his topic as well. Then maintenance KPIs all coming out of Maximo. We've done some extra modules like digital operator logging. And of course, when we talk about users, 22% increase in people who log in every month and 31% time spent, or more time spent in the system. Right, so we're collecting better data, we are getting better insights. So that is for part one, right, on how in 3 years we had a struggling CMMS that through those 45 small incremental improvements made a thriving CMMS with a very active user base. We've got user community sessions, we've got training programs, all inside our conglomerate now. So that brings us on why we are ready for part two, right, on how those 19 power plants can move to MAS 9. So to give a bit of background, right, we were on 7.6, and as part of the 5 years before that, we had upgraded to 7.6.1.3 to be ready for this upgrade. Right, so that's a little bit cheating. Right, we got our ducks in a row before starting the upgrade. The fleet has renewable as well as fossil fuel assets, although most of the megawatts are on the fossil fuel side, predominantly coal. So we've got a few hundred megawatts in run-of-river hydro. We've got PV solar. We've got geothermal energy, battery storage, oil-fired, and then these two are coal-fired power plants. So in the blue box is everything on Maximo 7.6. Right? The little white box with the red outline, that 2,000 megawatt is also on Maximo, but on a different Maximo. So they were not part of the upgrade. And this one in green, that is a new addition to the fleet. And that's important info because we were planning to go live only in December this year. Until our management called us up and said, oh, by the way, we're taking over a power plant, you need to be live in August. Right, so that is a few months accelerated. So in terms of timeline, originally we were thinking mid-November, December go live. With that new power plant incoming, right, we took them over in August, mid-August. And the incentive was to have them on Maximo 9 from the get-go. So this was our project schedule. We said, well, we'll try to start in February, but in the end, I only got the purchase order out last week of February, and I said I would like to go live mid-July, a full month before the power plant. In parallel, of course, this power plant would go through SIT, UAT, data upload, etc., etc. So some of that we did on 7.6, and some of that project we did in Maximo 9. So highly condensed, right? Good to know is we were on AWS, so we chose to go for ROSA. We then took the few months to build and test it, and we had a very condensed smoke testing SIT, UAT schedule ahead of that go live. So having that active user community across the fleet and them understanding that they need to test it, that they need how they need to test it, as well as that they are authorized to sign off for these type of changes. Right, all the work we did the last 5 years made sure that we can actually do this in less than 1 month. That plus a little bit of help by not having any critical issues. So 18 weeks from notice to proceed to go live. So on the next slide, right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the cutover. And we rehearsed this over and over again to shorten it best we can. This is how we did our cutover. So we did it in the middle of the week. Not ideal. Most people would say do this during the weekend and the night. But as we had the power plant incoming, this was the best schedule for us. So Monday night at 7 p.m., we closed down Maximo. 4 hours later, we opened it up again, but we transformed everybody's user account to read-only. So we said you can print your work orders, you can revert to all information that you have, but you cannot actually post any transactions. So in parallel, we had to clone the database, upgrade the database to MAS 9, do some post-migration activities, set up the integration to connect to the new server instead of old server. And then we had our internal smoke testing. So this process went pretty smooth. Right? It did take us roughly 60 hours to migrate, but we only had to shut down the Maximo proper for 4 hours, right? Because of that read-only access that we gave. In terms of integration and smoke testing, it was pretty uneventful, although our integration middleware had an issue, so we had to reinstall the integration. And in the end, we went live Thursday afternoon as planned. So then I said, well, hypercare was pretty uneventful, but that's exactly what we want, right? We don't want any surprises during hypercare. So for the technical specifications, at the moment we are in AWS ROSA. We have four instances of a 4x large instance. That together we have about 750 gigabytes of Maximo database. For those who want to know, right, that takes about 2.5 hours to back up or 4 hours to restore. We run our MAS 9 prod with 8 nodes, 5 in the UI, 1 for cron, 1 for MIF, and 1 for reports. We had about 100 gigabytes of attachments that we moved to the S3 bucket. That was from an AWS file storage. It became an S3 bucket. So uploading that from Amazon to Amazon took about 15 minutes. When we started the project, we were expecting 135 concurrent users. At the moment, I am at 185 concurrent users every week. And then in total, 2,500 users log into SAML, but that is 1,100 unique ones every month. So all of that, right, the project went live July 15. August 15, we took over this power plant, including 350 extra users. And now that we've ramped it up there, they added those 50 concurrent users. Our UI pods managed to hold the load, so we're very happy with that. And we're still doing ongoing coaching to get the most out of Maximo for them. So that's not all, right? We're still working on Maximo Mobile. We actually have Maximo Mobile up and running from the days on 7.6.1.3, which is compatible with Mass Mobile. So we had inspection forms already in use, and we were doing some pilots on work order tracking. So those stay, and then now added is, for next year, is raising work requests or service requests, as well as adding attachments and logbook entries to collect better data in the field. So for Maximo Monitor, it's installed in our test server. We're going to do UAT later in the month. And there we say, well, it's learning as we're doing. Right? We're doing exactly what Stan said. We've tried it out for an equipment class or two and see how we're going to improve from there. We're not installing Health and Predict yet. And the honest answer is we've got similar tooling, but the main thing is that from a leadership perspective, it sounds like something we already have or are not paying for. So for now, focus is on mobile and monitor. So we just finished that project in July. We had the new power plant coming in August. And then one last thing is that next February, we are bringing online another 700 megawatts of power plant. There will be a pumped hydro, which we bring in from SAP into Maximo as well. So that project is supposed to start next week, which means we need to do one more Maximo implementation in 13 weeks, or if we reduce the Christmas period, we've got about 11 weeks from start to finish. So that is my last slide. I would like to open up the floor for questions. I know you guys are also very hungry, but if you have questions, shoot, and otherwise we will talk over lunch as well. Yes.
The migration from 7.6 to 9, do you have any customisations in 7.6 you had to get rid of first?
Good question. So the question was, did I have any customizations that I had to get rid of first? So no. So we started, when we first installed Maximo, we were on 7.5. Our IT had always firmly believed not to do custom Java code. We do have some, we used to have some database triggers for integration tables, but we got rid of those when we moved to 7.6.1.3. So as part of the pre-work of the upgrade to 7.6.1.3, we pretty much got rid of all custom Java code, all custom integrations. And at the moment, we are actually integrating REST API to REST API. So it's really on the application layer. So no message queuing, no database triggers, no custom Java code whatsoever. I am sure if I had that, the project would have taken longer. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
So how do you manage the backlog within the start centers? Because when the data volume is quite large, like you mentioned 5,000 workloads, which need to be closed at times. So how do you manage that to start center? Because start center performance will go down when you have a huge data set.
So the question is, how do we manage the volume of data in the start centers, right? So for new users during the first login, I think, well, the guys on the technical side of Maximo will know that it tends to crash your UI node because of the volume of data in too many start centers. For regular users, after their first login, we found that the impact was negligible. So we did fine-tune the database indices. We also decided that instead of having very complex queries, we would have escalations in the background to populate extra fields in the database just for query performance. But other than that, we were quite okay. So I had one facility that when they went live, they had 25,000 in the backlog. That, granted, that was a bit much, but 5,000 was not a big deal. Now, at the moment, most of my facilities are doing about 500. Well, the very good ones only have like 100, but on average, 500 to 1,000 are in their open backlog. Yep.
Another question. So you talk about the inspections. So when someone is filling inspection when they're offline, mobile, when someone is filling inspection when they're offline, and if the inspection questions have some formulas which dynamically calculate when you're filling the form or the question, so how do you get that sync back to Maximo if something goes in error? Then what happens when they comes online? How those formulas gets calculated because it's already submitted?
So to my knowledge, right, our inspection forms do not have those formulas. So it is mainly pass, fail, meter readings, etc. We're fairly, I would say, fairly basic inspection readings. Have we had sync issues? Yes, of course, right? That's part of life. But yeah, no issues. Actually, the main thing that we're trying to optimize in the inspection forms is that we've got some inspections which are operator-driven, right? So that's fine. You go on the tablet, you click new inspection, you go do your daily inspection round. But we've got other inspections which is reliability driven, so that needs to come out weekly or monthly. So we want the PM plans to generate the inspection requirement, but also we want to close the loop that once all inspections have been done on the tablet, that it feedbacks back into the work order for final review and closure. So that's where we've got some automation scripts, not completely done yet, but we really want to link the two processes of PM setup with planning and scheduling, which then impact your reliability inspections, and upon completion, close the work order out. Yeah. Other questions?
Just a question around integrations into third-party applications, like accounting system, for example.
Yeah.
And which technologies did you find worked or didn't work, like email listeners or API integration?
So most of my integrations come from ERP into Maximo and back. We are doing everything with REST APIs. There were a few, when we started that back in 2022, 2023, we thought it was going to be easier than it turned out to be. Our old design was message queuing, but my problem with message queuing is that the failure occurs, but it's hidden, right? The end user doesn't know that the message didn't go through, which just workarounds for, but that was one of our concerns. So we said we should avoid that. We want the end user to see that there is an issue, right? Or we need to have other ways to inform the user and make sure the glitches get fixed. Not the IT desk, preferably the end user. Because again, right, a conglomerate, 20 facilities, centralized IT, they will never know what is important for every site. So we did the REST APIs thinking it's next gen, high performance, real time, and if there's issues, the end user will straight away see the issue because we can catch the error and we can show it on the screen. Then the practical problems came. So as we do, let's say we were registering an item master in Maximo, we were going to send that to the ERP system. But we learned that we don't have to send that message one time for one item, but we need to manually add it for every organization and every storeroom, which adds up to like 80 different messages. And if one of them fails, then we need to handle the rollback as well. So that is where traditional middlewares obviously would have more flexibility than now with REST APIs, which a lot of custom coding was involved. Another one we had was with purchase requisitions. We do the financial approvals inside Maximo. The original design would integrate the PR upon final approval, which makes sense from an IT perspective, but we forgot that the final approval could be your board of directors, who are then clicking the button and saying, oh, error, insufficient funds, right, which is not their problem to solve. So also there we had to fine-tune that we send through drafts during the approval, whereas the final approval is just to change the status. So those were the practical issues that we had with REST APIs. I would say the benefit is that as we move through different environments, on-prem, on cloud, etc., REST APIs are pretty agnostic because it's just a URL that you need to change. Did that answer your question? Yeah? So we've got 1 minute left, if there is a final question.
Any other questions?
Okay, and then back to you.
All good. Thank you so much, Niels. Round of applause.